Hey, real estate agents, have you ever lost a listing based on price? You know, maybe you've gone too low, or even more frustrating, you've gone too high. It's like, 'cause I know I did. I've lost it on both ends. And I remember the last time where I lost it because I went too high, and the guy was like, well, you don't know this area. I was like, that's it. I'm gonna go find myself a system that I will never, ever, ever again lose a listing just based on price. I found it, and that's what I'm gonna share with you today. And I'm breaking it down into 3 easy steps. My name is Guillermo Salas. I've helped over 1,500 clients in my career. And when I was in the height of my production, I was taking 100 listings annually. And I'm used the system that I'm about to share with you today on pricing. So if you want to hear about this tip and all the other tips that help me grow multiple leverage businesses and multiple passive income sources, then just hit that notification button up there and subscribe to my channel, and you'll hear about the content before anybody else. So let's jump into it. First, let's talk about the process. The process is really important, right? You don't want to jump into the pricing discussion right when you get to the listing conversation. Like sometimes you'll get that from the sellers. They're going to pressure you like, hey, just tell me what we could sell it for. Here's the thing. You wouldn't have time to show all your value. So you want to build rapport, right? You want to walk around the house while you're showing the house, build rapport. You want to ask a bunch of questions about their goals so you understand what they need and want to achieve. And then you want to go through the process of what it looks like is going to work with you as a listing agent. So that by the time you get to pricing, they're already internally like, man, this cat is cool, man. He's got a system and a process. He's super professional. Like he's on another level, or she, right? You want that set up before you even get into the pricing, because it's going to set sort of like your position as the expert on this topic, the expert in your profession. So that's number one. Have that pricing discussion definitely after you're building rapport, asking questions, and have set the process. It explains the process of how it's going to look like to work with you. Number 2, mindset and expectations. Here's the reality. Price is not an exact science, right? So give yourself some grace. We are not the experts on price. We're experts in a lot of different things, helping you market your property, guiding you through the process, but nobody has the crystal ball to tell you exactly, boom, this is the price that it's going to sell for. That's it. Stop. That's the end of that conversation, right? And so you're going to set the expectation internally for you, but you're going to set the expectation externally with a client. That price is not an exact science. In fact, I go like, man, it's a little bit art. It's a little bit science, right? Science is we're going to look at all the comps. But the thing is with comps, they're already dated, right? It's backwards looking information. That market's already shifted and changed. So we're going to use that as a guide. But like all economic indicators, they lag. And so that information is dated, but it's going to guide us generally, right? So that's the science part. But the art is like art in the real world, it's subjective, right? One person feels one thing about art, the other person feels something else. And so the subjective part is, hey, some people are not going to value an open floor plan. Some people are going to value maybe like an older house that's cut up inside, or something that's built in the 1800s. That's the subjective part of things. So the price is going to be a little bit art, a little bit of science. And the cool thing is we're in a free market system, right? It's going to tell us whether we're right or wrong. So you, me, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we're going to use the data that we have available to ourselves the best way possible. And we're going to make the most educated guess. We're both smart here. We're going to figure this out together. However, when we go into the market, you know, we might be right, but probability-wise, we might be a little bit off. And the cool thing is the market's going to tell us whether we're off. And this is how it's going to work. If we're too low, cool. We're going to get multiple bids, and it's going to raise that price up to where it should be. So don't be worried if we go too low. If it's too high, well, the market's going to tell us that too, right? And that's going to show up in no showings, or very few showings, or no offers. And in fact, I set the expectation, right? This is mindset and expectation. I set the expectation that over a 2-week period, if we have less than 10 showings, or we have 10 showings and no offers, that's the market telling us that we're overpriced. So already, right, the process, right, the order in which we do things, and then the mindset and setting expectations is a huge part of the system. Now let's get into the how. So the technique that I'm going to teach today is, I call it the self-discovery method. And it really is that because you're not dictating to the prospective seller, right? Nobody wants to be dictated to. This is guiding them along the process so they self-discover what the right price should be. And so in order to do that, we got to keep it really simple, right? We can't overwhelm them with like a massive CMA. We can't overwhelm them with massive data points. Literally, you want to come in with 8 to 10 properties as comps max. And the way you want to break it down is you're going to have a little bit of, you're going to have 2, 3 of sold properties, maybe a little bit more, right? You're going to have a couple sold. You're going to have a couple of expired and withdrawn. And then you're going to have a couple of actives, right? So 8 to 10 properties, but it's important that you have all 3 categories. And then you're going to explain to them before you even get into the pricing discussion what those categories mean. And this is typically how the conversation goes with me. It's like, all right, so we're going to go through these categories, and sold is the first category you're going to go through. Sold properties are the ones that live the dream, right? They had the dream of selling their property and they actually executed the dream. So there's a lot of good data from them, right? We want to see where they started, how they priced it, how many days on the market on it, because we want to follow a successful path. Don't you agree? Right? And then expired withdrawn. Well, that category is really important too. That's going to give us a lot of good data to follow as well, right? Those are people who didn't deliver the dream. Right? They made the mistakes. They didn't get to where they wanted to go. And there's a lot of great data to learn from them as well. What not to do, right? Make sense? And then the third category is the active properties. So once we figure out what the range of properties are, it could possibly be for your home, then we're gonna look at the market and we're gonna look at the competitive landscape. And that's what the actives are, right? That's the competitive landscape. And dependent on your wants and needs, right? Oftentimes sellers either want to sell quickly or for more money, some combination of those two, or maybe they're an expired, they had a bad customer experience, but we'll just focus on sell quickly or more money. And depending on which one you are is going to dictate where we fall on the range of prices. And so we're going to look at the competitive landscape and figure out where within the price ranges and the competitive landscape, we're going to position your home. Make sense? Cool. So those are the 3 categories that you want to go through, and you need to explain what they mean before you start going into the actual process of comparison. Okay, now that we've explained what the categories mean, we want to start running them through the data. And so I always start with the solds, and that's what you're going to do here as well to follow this process. And, have it whatever way you prefer, whether you're using a tablet and they're side by side with you, paper, projecting on the screen, but you want to make sure they're engaged. And when you pick the solds, my recommendation is to have one sold that's clearly not as good as your subject property, one that's really on point, and at least one that's way better, right? So you're going to set the parameters, right? Here's the floor, here's the ceiling, and this is where you live, right? And so you're going to go through each of these and you're going to do the apples to apples comparison and walk through some of the data. So for instance, the one that's not as good, you can be like, all right, well, this one, let's say the subject property is a 4-bedroom, 4-bath, 4,000 square feet. Just keep it up for us, right? And so the first property that sold was 3 bedrooms, 3 baths, 3,000 square feet, and it sold for $500,000, right? It started at $525,000, reduced within 10 days, and sold for $500,000. So you want to go not only through the beds and baths, but then you start want to walk through, here's where it listed, here's how quickly it sold, and then reinforce the data that matters. Like, yeah, it listed at this price. They didn't have to do price production because they sold within the metric that's happening right now in this market within 30 days. They sold within 30 days. So it looks like they priced correctly for their property. This one's smaller than yours, so not as good. And then you hit them with the middle one. All right, this one's like same number of beds, same number of baths, same square footage, has a pool. They listed at $550 and they sold at $545 within 20 days, right? And then you go to the one that's way bigger, right? This one is 6 bedrooms, 6 baths, 5,000 square feet, and that one listed at $600 and sold for $590 in 30 days. So you want to set the bookend so that they're basically self-discovering what is the reality, right? You're not dictating to them. If they're rational actors, they're going to look at the one that's at the bottom, like, well, mine's better than that one. They're going to look at the one that's at the top and like, well, mine's not as good as that one. And they're going to be like, that one in the middle. So you go through the solds, then you're going to do the same thing with the withdrawals. Like, here's one, that is just like, same number of beds, same number of baths, same square footage, has a pool, and instead of listing at 550, they listed at 700. You got the right data set, right? You're gonna show like, hey, was on the market 180 days, we're in a market where things are selling in 30 days, kept on price dropping, maybe didn't price drop, and if you got the golden apple, like that golden grail, like if you could find one that's way better than the subject property, but ended up selling below or the list price when they finally took off the market, properties that actually sold. So like in this scenario, we're talking about 550. Actually, they listed at 535 before they took it off the market. That's just going to reinforce the message like, hey, if you overprice a property, you're more likely than not going to sell below your fair market value. And that's the harm in overpricing your property. So that's a great sort of message to deliver at that point. Now that you've gone through the sold and expires, then you've got to ask a very important question at this point. Which one of these houses feels like the most like yours? Critical, right? Because you're going to figure out whether they're a rational seller or an irrational seller. If they're rational, they're going to point to that one in the middle that said, like, yeah, listed for 550, sold for 540, 545 within 30 days. And that's gold. They've now self-discovered what the right pricing method based on the data, right? Based on the way the market's acting, and it wasn't you dictating. Now, if they're like, hey, they're saying, well, mine's most like the bigger one, the one that has, thousands more square feet, 8 more bedrooms than yours, then you might be dealing with a rational seller. And at that point, you might need to re-enroll them in the process and start from scratch again. Or, the alarm bells might be going off like, man, this is somebody that I may not want to work with. In fact, the business card of the realtor that you like the least in the market, and send it to them so they waste their time and not yours, right? And so that's the critical question. You have to ask that, and hopefully they're rational sellers and pick up on the property that they should be looking at. And then at that stage, you get them to, you've now acknowledged, right, well, that's a great pricing strategy. Let's look at the actives, right? The actives are the landscape, the competitive landscape. And based on what you told me in our consultation, what's most important for you is to sell quickly. And now we've got a couple properties. We've got 4 properties. We got 3 listed at 560. We got 1 at 550. How do you feel about listing ours at 550 as well? So we'll be below the other ones and more likely to get to our goal of selling more quickly. Or even go 545, right? Because if you're too low, we'll get bid up. That's the process right there, right? You get them to self-discover where they should be listing the property. And that's it. That's the system right there. You want them to self-discover where their property should be listed rather than you dictate the price to them. They feel empowered. They feel like they made the decision, and they have with your guidance. Here's a bonus piece to protect and make sure they're not giving you a counterfeit yes. So when you highlight they pick that property, I would go and summarize for them. Like, all right, cool. So this property listed at 550, was on the market for less than 30 days, and sold ultimately at 545. If we follow this plan, would you be happy with that outcome? It seems like it would match up with the goals that you stated earlier. And what you're looking for at the end of the day is, you know what, Guillermo, that's right. That's the right pricing strategy. And when we get that, that's gold, because they're not giving you that counterfeit yes. They're on board with that pricing strategy. And then I'm going to call you back later in the day like, hey, we ended up going with somebody else. There it is. Simple system, right? To never lose a listing overpriced ever again. Self-discovery. Like, nobody wants to be dictated to, right? As much as they might come in and say, hey, you're the expert, you tell me the price. Like, well, that's not how it works. It doesn't work that way. So give yourself grace. It's a self-discovery because now they're bought in. They're part of the process. They're accepting of the strategy. And now you set the expectation that, like, no matter how smart we are, it still may not be correctly on point. So you set that expectation up front. There it is. Go out there, practice it. If you need help on this, and I love it, man. This is one of my favorite topics. My calendar link is in my bio below, the description of this video. Just schedule 20, 30 minutes with me. I'm happy to go through with you and pick out the nuances. In the meantime, until the next video, go out there and cause and create miracles. Have a great day.